I'm Nick,
And I'm Al.
and we have decided to start a YouTube channel called Nick and Al's Beekeeping Adventures.
This is our first episode.
So bear with us.
Please. It's going to be terrible. I'm sure the other ones will get better.
Yeah. Have low standards.
We have been beekeepers for 3 seasons now.
Yeah.
And we thought that it would be helpful to share some of the things that we've learned over those 3 seasons with you, and for new beekeepers in particular, or people who are thinking about beekeeping. There's so many things that we have learned over the last 3 seasons, 3 years, that we wish we would have had packaged together in a nice, succinct, clear set of thoughts. And so that's really been the impetus for starting this set of videos for you. So if you're a seasoned beekeeper, you're probably not going to get all that much out of what we say, but if you're thinking about beekeeping, or you're brand new to beekeeping, then hopefully we can pass on some tips and tricks and information that will help you get started.
And these are all things that we wish we knew when we started.
Exactly. So we've come up with a bit of a framework around what we want to share with you. We are going to talk about a little bit about our journey for some context for those of you who might be interested in what's coming up. Then we'll talk about what you might want to think about before you start beekeeping, before you decide to become a beekeeper or not, and what those considerations might be. We'll talk a little bit about regulations, locations of hives, hive equipment and the types of hives, personal protective equipment, and then we'll talk about getting your bees and the different ways that you can get bees and pros and cons, and then we might have some sort of further episodes on future considerations. We might do some honey extraction, some more specific detailed episodes rather than this really broad summarized version of what we're talking about.
These are the first few. Is that how to get started and what do you need to think about?
So I guess we'll get started with our journey.
I'd have to say that I was the one who wanted bees in the first place.
I was very nervous.
When we started, I started thinking about getting bees, we were just building this house, and so we had a little bit of not a huge block or anything, just a regular suburban block, and I thought, what can we do for self-sustainability? Because I really think that the way that the world is, it would be good to be as self-sufficient as possible. And we're Canadians, and we live in a suburb or an outer suburb, I guess, in the west part of Melbourne. Australia. And I come from a family that lives fairly rural, and they're fairly self-sustainable in so many things. And so that's what the impetus of getting some sort of livestock for me. I wanted chickens. But they can really do a number on your lawn and can be quite a bit of a hassle. So then a few of the people I work with were talking about having beehives, and I really thought that was a really interesting idea. And I love honey. I think you used to not like it so much, but now love it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, we had the idea to get a beehive. And it took a bit. We did a lot of research. I did a lot of reading beforehand, and then we went out and visited a friend of ours who has a beehive, just to see what's the comings and goings, where he had put his beehive, and so that we could see what kind of impact it would have in our backyard or front yard or wherever we were going to put it, so that we could make some plans and see if it was really the thing for us.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of thinking before we even got the beehive in the first place.
And this was 3 seasons ago, so about 3 years ago. And we started with 1 hive.
And we started with a nucleus, which we'll talk about more later, about how you get bees and what kind of format you can get them in. But we started with 1 nucleus, which we grew over the summer season. And the second season, we, as new beekeepers and learning, didn't quite manage our swarms or our hive enough to prevent a swarm. And so that original hive swarmed 3 times before we got things under control.
In the period of about 2-3 weeks.
2-3 weeks. So our beehive was busting full of bees in the spring, and we just weren't attuned enough to get on top of things quickly enough, and so they swarmed, which we'll talk about.
But we caught one of those swarms, and that caught swarm became hive number 2.
Yeah.
So we call them hive 1, 2, and 3 because we now have 3 hives.
Yeah. And the third swarm from that hive we gifted to a friend of mine who wanted some bees.
Yep. So first season we just had 1 hive, and then we overwintered just with that 1 hive. Second season we had swarms. We caught one of those swarms, and that became hive. Then we had 2 hives, and now in our third season we have done a lot better at. You've done a lot better at controlling swarms. So there's been no swarming, but we did collect a swarm in the local area, and that has become hive number 3 for us.
Yeah.
So we're now on 3 hives, and 3 very strong, happy, busy hives.
Mm-hmm. And as part of our beekeeping kind of work, because I'm so passionate about bees and sustainability for food production and how important they are, whenever there's a swarm reported around the area, I try and go and collect it, and then we can try and rehome them to someone who needs or wants to start with bees. So we've collected our swarm that we made our 3rd hive, and 2 other swarms which we gifted to new beekeepers. Yeah.
So we thought we'd talk a little bit about honey, because a lot of people like to start a hive because of honey, or that's another side benefit of doing so. So just in terms of expectations, also our first season we had no honey, so it takes a while for each hive to grow big enough to be able to have surplus honey that you can collect. Then in our second season, we were very shocked to have harvested in 1 season 90 kilograms of honey.
That's 90.
So we had more than a couple hundred jars worth of honey. We had small little jars at first, but very excited. And this season now with 3 hives and 3 fairly mature hives now, because even the swarm is growing very quickly. We've already in 2 months, so this season is only 2 months old, collected another 70 kilograms of honey. So we're expecting at least another 100 kilograms or so, possibly quite a bit more. So it becomes, it very quickly becomes much bigger than one might expect, or than we expected certainly. So so be prepared, I suppose, as you progress. There need to be some plans in place for honey production or giving away your honey or so on.
The other thing is absolutely weather dependent. So if you are in an area that's in the midst of a drought, you won't be able to expect that you might not be able, well, you could expect not to take any honey that season for your bees, because obviously your bees should be your priority.
Yeah.
And leaving them enough supplies to survive, and particularly survive over winter, should be the biggest priority, not getting honey.
That's true. And it's all about nectar production for the flowers. So even though the flowers might be out, they may or may not have as much nectar as they did the previous year, the previous season. Yeah, that's true. And we've had a fairly wet season thus far, but also a fair amount of sun, so it's probably very good conditions for nectar production for those flowers.
Yeah, we're in Australia, we're under the influence of La Nina weather pattern, so it'll be a very temperate, wet summer, and I expect winter as well, and we'll see how that progresses, because I think La Nina is a multi-year weather system or climate change.
Yeah. So I guess our progression in summary is that we had a first season of learning.
Yeah.
And then the next season was very much about more learning and growing the apiary a little bit, and learning what to do with all of our honey and how to extract it. And we'll talk about that in some more detail. And now we've moved a little bit on to helping others start hives, collecting swarms. Now we're refining what we do with our honey and how we sell it.
And also the byproducts, the other byproducts of keeping bees, like beeswax, and what to do with that.
Yep. And throughout all of that, joined local beekeeping clubs. Nick is now the secretary of our local. Yep.
And hopefully contributing to the community of beekeepers, because that's a really important aspect. I'm sure if you ask, there's a saying in beekeeping, like in many things, if you ask 5 beekeepers what to do, you'll get 8 answers. So there's lots of different ways to manage bees. Often they're very specific to the area that you're in.
Yep.
So what I think I should do in Melbourne, in our area of Melbourne, might not be the right thing to do on the east side of Melbourne or in other parts of Australia or in the Northern Hemisphere. It's also very different based on the location that you're in.
And then even individual colonies of bees behave differently. So even between our 3 hives, we can see that there's very distinct differences in behavior.
Yeah.
Many, many, many similarities and overlapping behaviors, but then also many differences between each one.
Yeah. And this is a learning process all the way through, so I don't think we'll ever stop learning.
No. We're also not pretending to be experts, so these videos are not coming to you from the point of view of an expert who is... And truly we don't even know that even an expert would be able to give you advice in a way that you could just take it in and do it, because there are so many variables and each situation is so different.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess the important thing is to gather a threshold of information until you feel like you can understand enough to make your own decisions, and then just watch carefully and tweak as you go.
Yeah.
And that's really the secret. It's not about having all the answers, because the answers are not that clear most of the time.
It's almost like the scientific method, where you get a theory, you give it a try, you see how it works. If that doesn't work, try something else. So you're always open to doing something a different way, or going with what you know is working. And I think we're all joined in the interest of the ecology of bees, because it's so intrinsic to our food supply. And it's a really cool hobby.
Such a cool hobby. And such a convert, because I was so nervous about having bees in the backyard, about bees affecting our life in a negative way, about being stung, and that's turned into just a joy of beekeeping. It's so fun to watch the bees. It's so interesting. There's so many little aspects of things that you do around beekeeping that I really enjoy. I'm very hands-on, so I like the process of making the supplies, the frames for the beehives, and putting together all the equipment, and thinking about how that sort of operational stuff in the background happens. Yeah.
And I like more of the ecology of managing the colony, understanding bee behavior. I have a more science background. I really enjoy thinking about bee genetics and how does that work and how does that influence temperament and all of those things.
Yep.
So I think we make a good team.
Yes. So in terms of what we're doing next season, just for our own sort of where we're headed, where we think we're headed, I think we love doing education, and we're so excited about bees that we really want to share with others. So that's a big component.
And I think we are, just to be absolutely clear, we're hobbyists. This isn't our main job.
Yeah.
We don't live off of our honey sales or anything. We both have day jobs, which include a lot of education for both of us. So that's a big joy in my work in ways.
Absolutely.
And so I think having that extend into beekeeping is definitely something that I think will be great in the future, in the next couple seasons.
Yep. And then we've also had some invitations from a couple of interested parties around hosting hives on their sites, so on their land. So we might next year consider having quite a few more hives that we manage elsewhere, and that we potentially manage in a different way, in a more practical, hands-off sort of way, in comparison to the very detailed inspections that we do here and the amount of time we spend per hive. So yeah, next year I think will be quite different and interesting in another way.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the path for a lot of beekeepers. We've heard a lot of stories, especially in the clubs, that if you really love beekeeping, then you keep wanting to do more and more and more. So that's certainly one aspect. And that's not what we expected, I don't think. We expected to be happy with one hive, and that would be it. But now we seem to be quite excited about doing more and more.
We'll be looking at more significant honey production as we have more hives and more sites, and really looking at investigating what other products we can utilize and make from our bees, from just the sequelae of harvesting honey and having bees. As you can see, I've got little bits of honeycomb and things like that, and so you just kind of gather and collect those things as you go. So sometimes you need to figure out what to do with all of that stuff. And then how do you do that efficiently?
And safely, and what can you sell and all that. But we will talk about all those details in more detail in an upcoming video as well.
Yes, yeah.
So should we wrap up this little video for this time, and then join us the next time when we talk about what to do before you start beekeeping, all the considerations that you might have in terms of hive equipment and location and startup costs and all the little ins and outs that you might want to consider before you even commit, just as you start to research.
Yeah. If you have enjoyed this video and you feel like it, please subscribe and like. We'd be very appreciative if you're liking what we're doing, and be kind in the comments.
And tell us about your experiences in the comments too. We'd love to hear about what you would like to see us talk about, or what topics you're interested in, and we'll incorporate that into our videos wherever we can. All right. See you later.
See ya.